Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Brett Ender is the co host of the Meat Mafia Podcast, one of my favorite podcasts to listen to, which addresses fundamental problems in our food and healthcare system. Their principles are simple: eat real foods, buy locally, and cook your own meals. Brett is an advocate of carnivore and animal based forms of eating. Brett embarked on a healing journey in 2016 that would see him hospitalized from a debilitating ulcerative colitis and taking an extremely expensive drug once every 6 to 8 weeks. Wow. He eventually changed his approach and evolved to having zero signs of inflammation or microinflammation, mostly due to adopting an animal based diet. Brett ended up going full carnivore and within 2 weeks saw a complete abatement of symptoms. His journey led him into a deep exploration of health and nutrition, food systems, and regenerative agriculture. Today, he is half of the Meat Mafia duo, alongside his friend Harry Gray, where they explore nutrition and food with guests on their podcast. Brett is incredibly inspirational, and throughout his journey, he has made catalyzing change simple and actionable. Brett Ender, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Casey, I'm so pumped to be here, man. Thank you for having me on.
It's such an honor to have you. I kind of butchered your introduction there a little bit, but we're going to roll with it.
Not at all. I think that's what makes it genuine. I think about that sometimes when we record the intros to our show. It's like you stumble over a word or two and you're like, well, damn, should I release it? And it's like, yeah, you sounded great. It's genuine. It just makes it more authentic to the audience. So I love it.
So you do about as many podcasts as we do. We've done it just a little bit longer than you have. Do you still get a little bit of, I don't know if it's imposter syndrome or just a little bit of like, what am I doing here? I don't have a voice. Like, do you ever get a little bit of that nervousness?
Every week, I would say, honestly. And I think because, like you were saying, you've been doing the show a little bit longer than we have. We started the podcast in March of last year, so March of 2022. But for us, it was, similar to you. It's like we just wanted to kind of answer this fundamental question of like, what's gone wrong with our food system? And, Harry, who I co-host the show with, we played collegiate baseball together. We're best friends. We're business partners. We joke in like the Step Brothers scene with the bunk beds. That's kind of what we're like because we spend so much time together. But, we're not nutritionists. We're not doctors. We don't have degrees in exercise physiology. We're just two guys that are just curious about like what's gone wrong. We both had our own health journeys. And, the only way to kind of overcome that imposter syndrome is like, you have to speak to these experts and ask the questions that you want to know to just try and spread this information as far and as wide as possible. So for me, it's like, I try and take the emphasis off of myself and just realize like, look, I'm trying to do a show because I'm trying to help people. And if I can lean into that, just try and be confident, ask good questions, someone's going to gain some type of value out of it. So I focus on that versus like, imposter syndrome or what am I doing here? Because it's so easy for that to happen, especially in your first couple of years of creating something from scratch.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's your favorite author and one of my favorite authors, Stephen Pressfield, who wrote The War of Art and really talks about the difference between being an amateur and being a professional. And, whether either one of us is a professional or not is debatable, but we are showing up and doing the work, which you have to do. Like if you're an amateur, I'm an amateur cyclist. If it's raining outside, I don't have to go cycle. Like if I was a professional, it wouldn't matter what the weather is. I would have to go cycle. It's a totally different thing.
No, it's such a good point. And I've been thinking a lot about, because in his book, it's easy to read it and be like, all right, well, what am I actually a professional in? Am I a professional in cycling? Am I professional in podcasting? Am I professional in like, carnivore expertise? And I feel like it's easy to just take the pressure off and be like, just be a professional in life in general. And, I see that happen every day where it's like amateur version of Brett is like, okay, I know I'm going to record at least 3 episodes a week. I'm trying to scale a media company. I'm trying to grow a supplement company. I'm trying to build our brand. There's a lot of things that are part of that process every single day. And so I know that if I don't go to the gym at 6 a.m. every single day, I'm just not going to do it. I'm going to get out of the office around like 6, 7 o'clock. I'm going to cook a meal. I'm going to be on the couch. And it's, as much as I want to fantasize when the alarm goes off and be like, oh, I can go at night, that's never going to happen. So it's like that professional mindset of like, no, we get 7 hours of sleep. Maybe we're not going to get it every single night, but when the alarm goes off, I'm just going to go to the gym. I'm going to get my workout in. And even in just doing something, even if it's just walking and getting a little sweat on the treadmill for 20 minutes and stretching, that's going to set my mind to kind of be that professional for the rest of the day. So it's like catalyzing that change day in and day out.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that. And there's nothing wrong with being, amateurs in certain parts of our lives. And I do think of you as a professional podcaster. I think you guys do such a wonderful job. There's that interesting stat that it's like 40% of podcasts only have like 10 or less episodes, meaning people start one and stop one. You've been on both sides of that coin, haven't you? You started a podcast that didn't have very many episodes that eventually kind of fizzled out.
You do your research here. I'm really impressed by that. No one's actually asked me that before, but yeah. So, I think with my story, it's like I've always kind of had this burning desire to create something of value. I come from a corporate background. I was in sales, graduated college 2017, went right into my first sales job, and I loved it because I was competitive. And I think sometimes we conflate passion for being proficient at something. And so for me, it was like I really did enjoy building relationships with people, but I think I just trained myself to get good at it. But I wasn't incredibly passionate about it. In college, I was listening to the Jocko podcast. I was listening to Tim Ferriss. I was listening to Joe Rogan. I started getting into carnivore. I started seeing all these nutrition brands pop up. And I remember thinking in the back of my mind, it would be so cool to just have even carve out my own little small piece of the pie and have my own following. So in the middle of COVID, everything was uprooted. My buddy, Eddie, who I played baseball with in high school, we decided to start a show called the Arena Podcast. And
great name, by the way, great name.
Thank you. Maybe there could have been something there if we didn't stop. But, like you had said, the statistic is that 90% of shows don't make it past the fourth episode. So I think we maybe made it to episode 5. And then we recorded a bunch of episodes and backlogged it. I was doing more of the guest outreach. He was doing more of the back end editing. Our schedules got really busy. We ended up having a backlog of 6 episodes that we recorded. And then we kind of sat there with this overwhelming backlog. And to be honest with you, it was we just didn't want it bad enough. And the podcast kind of just died and fell by the wayside. But there was still a lot of benefit that came from that because it put me in the arena, no pun intended, of actually how to create something and at least go 0 to 1. And it ignited that spark that always stayed with me, so that when the Meat Mafia was really a thing, I was like, look, I've done this before. I've learned from my mistakes. And now let's put everything into this and just see what we can do in a year. And just that effort alone, it's dude, you can change your month in 3 to 6 months. You can change your entire life. I really believe that because that's what Harry and I have done. That's what you've done. And countless of other creators have done the same thing.
Yeah, that's amazing. I was just thinking all of those episodes that you made before, even though that show wasn't allowed to continue, there wasn't a waste, right? You got some experience and, it created that spark. Like you said, you guys came onto the scene. I feel like I've been pretty plugged into the low carbohydrate, ketogenic carnivore space for several years. I've been carnivore for over 4 years now. All of a sudden in 2022, I start seeing these anonymous guys, Meat Mafia. Who the hell are these guys? They're doing these great podcasts, these great posts on Twitter. You guys came out of nowhere.
Yeah, we did. And I think that just shows it's the internet is kind of taken down all these barriers to entry where it's you don't have to be super plugged in. You don't have to be super connected. It's if you write really good content in a way that appeals to people, it's anyone can scale and grow a following. And to your point, Casey, Harry and I have been practitioners and really dialed in with nutrition, carnivore, animal protein for a few years. When I graduated college in 2017, like I had mentioned, I had some pretty serious health issues. I had an autoimmune disease called ulcerative colitis. And essentially my colon, my GI tract was so inflamed from, partially genetics, partially the food I was eating, the lifestyle I was eating, drinking too much alcohol, chronically stressed out. I ended up losing 30 pounds. I was shitting blood 20 times a day. And I was on these medications that cost $400,000 per year. It was $80K a pop per infusion that I would get every 8 weeks. And I was told I was going to be on those medications for the rest of my life because autoimmune diseases are quote unquote incurable. And started coming around to this carnivore diet in 2019, cooking my meals, eating really good quality fatty meat, saturated fat, and staying consistent with it. And lo and behold, my stomach starts to get better. My inflammation goes away. My skin gets better. My anxiety goes away. And I'm at a point, I get a colonoscopy in 2021 where my doctor was like, look, your inflammation is gone. Your microinflammation is gone. You clearly take care of yourself. You're a young guy. I trust you to go off of these medications and continue the lifestyle that you're living. And so that for me was all right, food really is medicine. And I am a direct example of someone that doesn't have a degree, but I'm a practitioner in this movement. I've proven that the body can heal. There are millions of people out there that have autoimmune diseases or different types of chronic diseases that don't think it's possible to heal these things through food, diet, lifestyle, all these different levers that we can pull. And so Harry and I basically said, we have an obligation to just go on Twitter and start just creating some content and see how it resonates with people. And our medium was writing these informational threads where we would write stories essentially about the food system. I told my story about how I healed my stomach. I told the story of Ansel Keys. How did raw milk become demonized? How did saturated fats become demonized and seed oils became so popularized? Things like that. And people really started gravitating towards the stories. And now we're at a point where we have 130,000 followers, I think, on Twitter. We have 221 episodes of the podcast recorded. And I'm not saying that to brag about what we're doing. I'm just saying that when you actually have that passion and you apply your attention and intensity towards something and you put out really good quality content, people will gravitate towards it and you will scale an audience, and you can do that full time as well. That's why it's so powerful.
Yeah, that's amazing. I definitely want to deep dive a little bit more into your personal story. I couldn't agree more. And you never know what doors are going to go open up eventually because you at least made a start. We both found out about the carnivore podcast or the carnivore diet the same way through the Joe Rogan podcast and Sean Baker. And I remember an episode, somebody else, I can't remember who the guest was, back in 2018 saying look, it's 2018. There's not a lot of rules. There's not a lot of limitations. If you want to start a business, you can watch YouTube videos on a Saturday or in the evenings and start a business. You can learn these things. You can put out content. You can start shows. There's nothing really stopping you. And so I really love how you guys were able to create that content and start what you've created, which is absolutely amazing. I do want to ask, who came up with the name Meat Mafia?
Oh, it's such a good question. So the story is that Harry quit his corporate job in the fall of 2021 and started taking this Twitter writing course. And one of the things that the course recommended is to kind of pick a anonymous name. And he initially picked the name Cannoli Clemenza. I don't know why he picked this Godfather alias. I don't know why he chose Cannoli. And then when we started realizing that we were going to be writing about nutrition, we were like, well, probably Carney Clemenza is a much better name. And I'm like, well, I want to start writing about this too. So I was like, what's another good Godfather name that has pop? I was like, Salazzo, that's it. So I picked Salazzo. And then the first name was Food Mafia. And we were like, that's okay, but Meat Mafia has way better pop. So we were like the Food Mafia for a couple of weeks. We changed to the Meat Mafia. And it was kind of just a joke, but it was really this creative outlet where I'm working this corporate job. I'm really passionate about nutrition. I was almost just bursting at the inseams just to be able to share some of this stuff and create something. So for me, it was for the first 8 months, we didn't make $1 off of Twitter. It was we just had this desire to create and share information. So I basically dedicated myself to writing threads as if it was a second job. It was I would take my sales calls either before work, after work, or during work. I would write threads, I would do research, or I would record podcasts. June of 2022, I looked this up. We did 35 shows in a month. So I was making up all these excuses to my job why I couldn't make meetings. I was faking doctor's appointments, and they probably thought I was chronically ill, but you got to do what you got to do to build something out from 0 to 1. And that's really what we did. So another lesson too is there wasn't a ton of thought behind it. It was the brand is just something that's really developed organically over time. And you don't have to be perfect, just be good enough and start putting something out and just trust that if you put the reps in, you're going to iterate, you're going to improve, and you're going to end up in a point that you're really proud of.
I love that. I've never heard you talk about that actually. So I really appreciate that. It was an honest question. Yeah. Let's go back and talk about your personal history. You grew up very athletic. You played baseball. What was it like to feel like you were living a fit life, what would seem like a healthy life, but also have this debilitating condition?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think that I just justified everything that I did under the under the identity of I'm athletic, I'm a high level athlete. So therefore it's calories in, calories out. It's all going to fuel my performance. And so didn't know how to cook anything, was taking these synthetic pre-workouts, post-workout drinks, ordering pizzas at 2:00 at night after getting drunk on a Saturday, because that's the college lifestyle is probably the unhealthiest lifestyle that you can live. And I think about just the shape that we're in now where, kids are going into debt, paying $85K a year for some liberal arts degree where they're essentially just binge drinking on the weekends. They're not really learning anything. And they're kind of leaning into a lot of these unhealthy experiences. And I think that was really what kind of was representative of my collegiate career. So yeah, it was a calories in, calories out thing. I looked aesthetic enough on the outside. I was a high level athlete. I had, I think I had 12 Division I scholarships. I first played baseball at Seton Hall, which was a Division I school in New Jersey. I transferred to Babson, which is a small Division III business school based out of Boston, Massachusetts. And I kind of went from playing baseball because I loved it to more of like stress and like the need to really perform. And I'm just the type of person, my genetics, I hold stress in my stomach, whether it's like public speaking, whether there's like a business issue that's going on. It's like I can literally feel it in my stomach. And, I didn't listen to the signs of what my body was showing me. And when I was interning in 2016, I was 21 years old, I started noticing blood in my stool for the first time. And I just, I didn't think anything of it. I was probably just a dumb, naive kid that thought he was invincible. And I just kept pushing those symptoms off. And it was like the urgency to go to the bathroom was more extreme. There was more blood. It just kept progressing really quickly. The last day of my internship, I ended up getting rushed to the hospital in New Jersey. And I was going to the bathroom like 20 to 30 times a day at that point. And I was down 30 pounds. I was walking around at like 180, 185 back then. I got down to like 150, essentially looked like a skeleton of myself, and went to the hospital, got diagnosed with UC, put on all these drugs. And that was essentially my destiny. And I think someone that's listening to this is like, well, how could you let it get to that point? And the issue is that, especially young men, we're not taught to have this intuitive sense of like what actually makes our body feel good. We just, processed foods are everywhere. We eat for convenience. We eat for indulgence, enjoyment. We don't have this internal sense of like what foods actually work for my body. What's going to heal me? What's going to make me feel good? What's going to give me those incredible energy levels, make my gut feel really good? And I just fell into that camp of like, well, I'm just going to do what everyone else does. And I literally can't do what everyone else does because I have like a genetic disposition to some of these autoimmune conditions. And I just found myself in a really bad place.
What is your personal life at this point?
So my personal life is, I'm 21, I'm single, I'm in New York City for the first time, interning at a financial services firm. And I'm like going on dates, basically making up reasons for why I have to go to the bathroom for the third time on the date. So I'm like, this girl probably thinks I have like a Coke addiction or something because I'm going to the bathroom but it's like, it's embarrassing for men. It's like your life basically becomes revolved around where is the nearest bathroom. Like I remember when I would intern I was living with my parents in Jersey and I was working in the city, that train ride is like an hour and a half. When you're inflamed, that's a long time to not have access to a toilet. I remember one time I was literally on the toilet for like the entirety of the train ride, which was an hour and a half because I couldn't get off because my stomach was so inflamed. I get off the train, I go immediately across the platform and I just take the next train back home in the opposite direction because I'm like, I literally can't function and do my job. And so it was at that point I was like, all right, you're clearly past the point of repair. And then it was like a couple of days after that, I ended up just going, right to the hospital. But it was almost like it took such an extreme circumstance to understand like, you need extreme change to be able to reverse that. And these are the things that you need to do to get yourself into the life and the health that you deserve.
Yeah, that's such a great point. So you started to get on the medication. Did that work initially?
It did work initially. And that's actually a good point, Casey, is like, I'm not anti-biologic. I'm not Western medicine because there are some cases like myself where it's like, you've essentially gone past the point of repair and you now need pharmaceutical intervention to be able to get yourself out of the state of being so chronically inflamed. I mean, maybe back in the day, there were cases of people that, went on a carnivore diet or something like that. I know James Salisbury in the late 1800s, who the Salisbury steak is named after, people with IBS, IBD, he would have them go carnivore and black coffee. And that really helped a lot, which is interesting. But, for me, where we're at now is like, I just needed drugs to get myself out of that point of chronic inflammation. But the drugs still only took me to like 80%, where it was like, I got out of the hospital, I put weight back on, I was living a fairly normal life, but I would still feel the urgency to go to the bathroom. I still didn't feel like I was 100%. And I remember I started doing triathlons in 2019 and I ended up having to miss a race because I had my first flare up since getting out of the hospital in 2016. And that was kind of where the bells and whistles went off, where I was like, all right, what you're doing is only work to a point. And if you want to get to that next level, it's really leaning in on cooking your meals, eating real foods, truly being diligent and laying off all this processed shit that's around everywhere. Like you really need to take autonomy and control of the food you're putting into your system. Otherwise, you're going to live the rest of your life dependent on these drugs. And it's like, who wants to live dependent on these drugs? It's like everyone that's listening to this has the ability to live a badass, healthy, energetic, joyful life free of these medications. And so much of it is possible by putting the right foods in your body, living the right lifestyle, having a spiritual practice, believing in a higher power. There's like these levers that we can all pull that will give us a life that's greater than you could ever imagine.
Yeah, that's amazing. So when did Harry come into the picture? When did you guys start doing karate in the garage?
Karate, I love that. Yeah. So he's actually a year older than me. So he graduated 2016. He took a corporate job up in Boston. He was doing private equity and corporate real estate. And I went to New York, like I mentioned, in tech sales. And we didn't realize this at the time. We kind of grew apart after we graduated from school. And no reason for that. It was just kind of like, he was a grade older than me. We were fairly close in school, not best friends like we are now, but we both kind of had this similar interest in fitness and nutrition. So he was doing triathlons, he was doing marathons. I was doing the same thing in Boston. And then we reconnected right at the beginning of COVID. And I was kind of telling him my experience going carnivore, the benefits that I got from it. He had separately done like a paleo diet. He'd done a keto diet. He had just bought the Carnivore Code by Paul Saladino. So he was getting into a carnivore diet. So we realized that we had a lot of these same passions and we had just lost touch. And it's like, when you're in New York, so much of your lifestyle is revolved around like going to happy hours. People are just interested in money and finance. It's really difficult to connect with people that have these shared interests. So for Harry and I, we were like, all right, well, we're two guys that are passionate about the same things. We should be spending more time together. And we ended up signing up for Ironman Mont Tremblant up in Canada. And that was kind of our way to put a really big race on the calendar and just shake up the monotony that COVID really brought on a lot of people. A month before that race, because Canada was so strict with lockdowns, they canceled the race, which sucked because we had invested so much time and energy training for this thing. But the good thing that Ironman did is they offered you a race credit to roll into another race. And so we were like, all right, we're either going to Texas or Florida, because at that time, we know that those states are the only races that probably aren't going to get canceled. And we just wanted to do this thing so badly because we had made such a long time investment into this thing. So we signed up for Ironman Waco, small town, hour and a half outside of Austin. It's where Baylor University is. And then we got an Airbnb in Austin just to check out a new city. He was tired of Boston. I was tired of New York. We wanted to switch it up. And just living together with someone that shares that same passion, energy, intensity, it pushes you to a level that you're never going to get to on your own. It's why gym partners are so effective. It's like, you're not going to hit your max on your bench by yourself. You're going to hit it with someone that's spotting you, that's pushing you to go for that extra rep. And that was essentially like a metaphor for what it was like living with him. And so we trained for this race. We crushed it. It was an amazing experience. And we kind of left that 3-month stint at that Airbnb being like, we don't know what it is, but we need to find a way to work together. That same time, he was doing that Twitter writing course that I was telling you about. And that's really where we were like, fuck it, let's just do it. Let's go on Twitter. Let's create this brand. Let's start writing about nutrition as an experiment and let's see what happens. But we think really good things are going to come from it. And that was the whole genesis of what Harry and I are doing with the brand.
Very serendipitous that you guys would find each other later in life when you had so much more in common, having gone through separate journeys. His was more kind of a journey for improving his overall like fitness and health, where yours was more like when pain increases, hearing improves, you had to do something. So what was that first like when you first transitioned over to carnivore diet? Did you notice immediately that things were better? Were you skeptical? Was it difficult for you? What was that process like?
Yeah, I remember listening to Sean Baker on Rogan, like you had mentioned. And that episode was recorded in 2017, but I actually didn't listen to it to 2019, partially because I think it was that period of time where I was like, all right, I'm ready to cook my own meals. I want to learn more. I don't believe that I need to be on these drugs for the rest of my life. Are there any holistic options that are available? And, Sean very clearly in that podcast lays out what to eat on that diet. It's all animal products, primarily steak, chicken if you like it, fish if you like it, pork, eggs, some dairy if your stomach can tolerate it. Some people drink coffee maybe with some cream. I didn't swear off coffee. I still had some coffee, but I remember going to Whole Foods for the first time and loading up on all these steaks, ground beef, chicken thighs, butter. And I remember thinking the first time I ate 2 steaks a day, it was 2 ribeyes, and I cooked it in my tiny little shitty apartment in New York. Set off the smoke alarms, about to smoke out the apartment. And I remember thinking, like, is this going to kill me? Like, am I actually going to die of heart disease if I eat it? Because that's how much misinformation has been literally bled into people's brains by the standard American diet, this paradigm that we've been falsely led to believe for 70 plus years. But I'm like, you know what? He's talking about all these people that are getting healthy. He's clearly in amazing shape. He's a surgeon. There's a reason why he's leaning into this stuff. You don't feel as good as you can feel, so you have no right to criticize it until you do this thing. And I remember, man, like the first couple of days, like just cooking my meals, I would make a pound of ribeye, I would chop it up, I would bring it into the office in a glass Tupperware container. And it was like, lo and behold, like my energy felt really good. My stomach felt really good. I didn't feel this urge to have to go to the bathroom. I was effortlessly putting muscle on at the gym. My skin was getting clearer. I had more vitality. I was bursting out of bed at 5:30 in the morning to go to the gym. I was like, I've never felt this before. And I know it's because of the foods that I'm eating. And so that was the first time where I was taking almost like an internal scan of how my body felt and realized that it was responding so naturally to these foods. And like anything else, you just start to lean in more. You start to look into regenerative agriculture. You start to connect with ranches. You start to make your own bone broth. You start to cook with beef tallow. And it's like, it's this process. But for me at the time, I was, 23, 24. Yeah, I would go to Whole Foods, but I would also go to the conventional grocery store because my budget afforded me $20 worth of meat a day. And guess what? That still really helped. So I think there's a lot of misinformation out there that can be overwhelming for people. Like people look at like a Paul Saladino and they're like, holy shit, if I'm not eating grass finished regenerative beef and, organic honey and bone broth that I'm boiling myself, I'm not going to be getting really healthy. And it's like, I don't think that's true at all. I think at a minimum, if you just if you start shopping at the outer aisle of the grocery store and where the real food actually lies, get out of the inner aisles where the processed shit is, where the margins are really good for these companies. That's an amazing starting point. And you're going to feel really freaking good. And you're going to progress over time and eventually get to the point where you want to be at. And that's exactly what happened to me.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love the way Sean Baker approaches it. And I love the way he presented it at KetoCon, where I was able to meet you in person, where he asked the question like, okay, yes, we're very confident in this space that cholesterol does not cause heart disease, that LDL cholesterol is not harmful. My own wife has an LDL cholesterol above 200. So that's a little bit alarming. Like we have to be fairly confident about these things, to allow that to happen. But he'll still say, what if we're wrong? What if you do die of a heart attack because of cholesterol, because you're eating a carnivore diet? And it's still like 90% of people say, well, I don't really care because I feel so good. Like, I don't want to go back to having anxiety. I don't want to go back to having ulcerative colitis and going to the bathroom 20 to 30 times a day. Like it's totally worth it for the way that you feel.
Yeah, I really love that you brought this up because it's like there's so many people that are singularly isolating for this cholesterol variable, and they're not paying attention to other metabolic health measures like waist size, which is the biggest predictor of your overall health. It's scientifically proven. It's literally your waist size, blood pressure, resting heart rate, HDL to triglyceride ratio. There's all these other metrics that are overall determinants of your health. And there's so many people that are so scared of saturated fat because I think it's going to jack up their LDL that they start eating all this processed shit. They're eating Cheerios for breakfast, oatmeal for breakfast, refined grain, sugars, orange juice with fucking English muffins for breakfast. And they wonder why they feel like shit and they're overweight. And those are actually the triggers that are going to cause them to actually have heart disease and die of a premature death, not a pound of ribeye from a grass-finished ranch. And the beautiful thing about your wife's story is now there's these movers and shakers like Dave Feldman and I forget the kid's name, Nick. He's in medical.
Dr. Nick Norwitz.
Yeah. Yeah. They're these incredible people that have like these lean mass hyper responder theories where it's like maybe you have lower body mass and eating saturated fat jacks your LDL up, but as long as these other metabolic measures are in order, you're going to be in really good health and be amazing. It's like, it's incredible all the research and data that's coming out to actually point people in the right direction, because for so many middle-aged men, it's like, oh, your LDL's high. We're going to get you on a statin. You can't eat saturated fat. You can't eat the really nutrient-dense foods that are actually going to give you the life and the vitality that you want. We're basically sucking all that out of them and just putting them on this like pharmaceutical merry-go-round that's never going to end.
Terrible. And as you're listing all those foods in the standard American diet, I'm just laughing to myself thinking like, and carnivore is the fad diet. Like really?
No, 100%. And it's like, I was thinking about doing a post on this yesterday, whether it's like carnivore, keto, low carb, the Atkins diet in the 90s and 2000s. It's like, we can brand this shit all we want, but it's like, it's just eating real foods that we've been designed to eat for 2.5 million years. So it's like, I really defy you to show me a way that a food that we've been eating for 2.5 million years is all of a sudden increasing our cholesterol levels and essentially killing us the last 80 years. I don't believe that. Like, just use some logic and some common sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the journey that you've been on through Meat Mafia. You guys interview tons of different people and cover lots of different topics. What have you learned as far as what you mentioned earlier, like misconceptions or myths as far as our food systems goes? Maybe you can just pick out like some of the more important things that you've learned going along that journey.
Yeah, I think someone that loves capitalism. I think it was kind of a punch in the gut, just understanding the corporatization of food that has gone on, like really opening my eyes with the fact that, for years, you're just kind of trained to go throughout your day, shop at the inner aisles of the grocery store, like I mentioned, and you see all these different logos, you see these colorful boxes, packages, designs, and not understanding the fact that like there's 37,000 products in the average grocery store, but they're controlled by a really small handful of companies. You bet it's about 10 to 12 companies. They're almost all publicly traded. And as a publicly traded company, it's like your fiduciary responsibility actually is to maximize shareholder value. So if you're maximizing shareholder value, you're trying to get the best margin that you can possibly have. So what do? You switch from real sugar to high fructose corn syrup. You sub out animal fats, which are more expensive, for highly processed industrial seed oils. You swap in refined grains, which the government is literally subsidized to grow corn, wheat, and soy. And you mass combine these ingredients. You add ingredients and flavor additives, and you create these huge flavor labs. And you create this processed food that's very cheap. It's highly addicting. And then you can have marketing, but massive, insane marketing budgets to really drive people towards this food. And I think the more that you start to understand the economics and the behind the scenes decisions that have happened in the last 50 to 80 years, you start to come away to the fact like, okay, this actually makes sense why 70% of Americans are overweight or obese. And it's like, we've really broken the backs of our small farmers. Like the average size of a ranch is essentially just done this. Like almost like hockey stick growth. Average size of a farm is gone way up, and the average number of farmers is absolutely plummeted in a similar trajectory. And it's like, it's not, it makes complete sense when you start to look at those things from that perspective, where it's, we've really lost our connection to our food source. Like if you're buying meat at the grocery store, some of that meat could have 30, 40 plus touch points before it actually gets to that package, it gets onto your plate. And the best investment that you can make that I've learned is like seeking out personal relationships with your rancher in your area. You can literally go to eatwild.com. You can pop in your zip code. It'll give you dozens of ranches where you can buy meat, eggs, milk, cheese, pork, chicken, fish, and just start to connect with them, know their names on a first name basis, build relationships with them, and buy those products from them and start cooking your own meals and just get off this fucking processed food cycle that we found ourselves sucked into.
Yeah, no, that's such a great point. And I've asked this question a lot, and I've got lots of different answers. And I think I know how you're going to answer it, but I want to get your opinion on this. Last year, I was able to meet a rancher. His name's Brennan, HTTL Farms in Nevada. I was able to buy a quarter cow from him. I got to meet his whole family. Dude, they're all like accidentally kind of on carnivore, and all these kids are like super well behaved, like energetic, but like great attentions, and they were like polite and kind, and like it was really fun to actually like see these guys. And you see the pictures of the kids playing with the cows in the pastures, and like the cow was born there, lives there, it dies there, it never even leaves the property. And it's really amazing. And the quality of the meat was really great. And I will buy that quarter cow, and I will also go to the clearance section of my local grocery store, and I'll grab a tri-tip or a chuck steak that's on sale that I know I can throw on the Traeger and have really good food there as well. Where do you draw a line between different types of quality as far as meat goes?
Yeah, I love this question. And, the quarter cow is tricky because, like you said, the best investment that you can make is building that relationship with Brennan, getting to know his family. He can tell you the exact lineage of the cow. It never leaves the property. It's grazing on his grass for the entire life cycle of the cow. Butchers it at a local facility, processes it, gives it to you. It's the cleanest, simplest transaction ever. At the same time, the issue with the quarter cow, especially if you're animal-based or carnivore and you really like steak, is you're going to get a ton of ground beef. So I like ground beef, but I love steak. And I don't want to just buy up all the prize cuts from the rancher too. So it's like, I get quarter cows, I get half cows. There are creative ways to make ground beef. I never get tired of burgers and things like that. But for me personally, my stomach does feel the best when I eat those fattier cuts of steak, not necessarily the ground beef. So it's like, I think you kind of just have to do like the good, better, best approach, where it's like good is just eating red meat in general, getting off the shit in the inner aisles of the grocery store, getting off the processed food, buying meat at your grocery store, even if it's grain finished at an industrial feedlot, regardless of the incentives, what it's doing for the environment, to fill you with energy. That's an amazing starting point. It's going to clear that brain fog. You're going to start to wake up. Your metabolic health is going to significantly improve, and you're going to really start to think clearly for the first time. Better is buying like grass finished meat. So meat that's actually cows that have been fed grass the entirety of its life. There are a lot of labeling loopholes that have gone on. So you can actually there was something that was called the COOL Act, which was the Country of Origin Labeling Act. And that required you to actually state if it was a product of the USA or state the country that it was actually grown in. So like if the meat was actually harvested in Brazil, it had to put that on the label. Tom Vilsack, who was the head of the USDA under Obama, Joe Biden brought him back. He repealed the COOL Act in 2016. So what that means is that an animal can be raised, harvested, killed in Brazil, processed in Brazil, but as long as it's shipped over to the US and packaged in plastic in the US, it can still be labeled as a product of the USA. Also, like you're legally allowed to label beef grass-fed if it's been fed grass at some point in its life. So it's like you can still get meat that's labeled grass-fed, but it has been finished on grain. We can go into the disputes of like what's more nutritionally dense, but I would say better is actually getting like grass-fed, grass-finished meat. And the best is buying like grass-finished regenerative meat from a farm, a local farm like your buddy Brennan, who's actually like, they're not using synthetic fertilizers. They're not tilling. They're actually, it's basically like this incredible biomimicry, like Joel Salatin almost describes it as like an orchestra that goes on between the animals and the land. And they're able to like sequester carbon back into the soil. They're able to create this incredible nutrient dense soil that's like chocolate cake. They restore the ecosystem, all these new animals, all these new species kind of pop up on the land. And then you're able to get the benefits of that really nutrient dense meat. So it's like, I don't view any meat as bad. We could talk about the incentives behind those things, but it's like the good, better, best approach. And like we mentioned, my starting point was the good meat. You will get the good meat when it's on sale. I'll get the good meat sometimes when it's on sale. It's like, every once in a while, the Whole Foods in Austin will have these incredible grain finished ribeyes that are like $12 a pound. I'm not going to pass up on that, right? I'm still a little bit budget sensitive, but if I can, I'm trying to get that best quality meat from the local rancher in Austin where I can verify it. I know it's regenerative. I know it's never been injected with hormones or antibiotics, and I can really verify where it's coming from. So it's really the good, better, best approach.
I love that answer. That was very thoughtful and well explained. I can see how shipping meat from Brazil would be very problematic. Selfishly, I used to live down there, and the best picanha I've ever had in my life from a real churrasco. Dude, I kind of am hoping to encounter some Brazilian meat in my local grocery store. I wouldn't complain.
Dude, the picanha is like, that's the other thing. You bring up a great point. It's like, when you start to really like lean into your food and you start to build relationships with your butcher and rancher, you figure out all these cuts that aren't conventionally sold at a grocery store that are so good. And like you mentioned, the picanha, it's a Brazilian cut, but it's really like the cap of the sirloin, and they cut it. So you get that nice fat cap on the end of it. It's really cheap. And it basically cooks like a strip, and it's like $10 to $12 a pound. Like the Denver cut is the same exact thing. It's like, I'm going to my rancher, give me that Denver cut all day long, because it's like 10 to 15 bucks. It cooks like a strip. It's super fat. It's super tender. But there's all these things that you start to learn about when you really start to lean into your diet and understand that like it's so much more than just like ribeyes and strips and chuck roasts and things like that.
Yeah, sirloin is one of my favorite steaks to have with my eggs. And I lament the fact that like, this is missing the cap. You took the cap off of this. This could have been picanha. Such a bummer. Such a bummer.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Go ahead.
No, so I was going to say the last thing is like, it's a good point. It makes me think, your question makes me think about like all these other ways to stretch a budget. And obviously, the ribeye is like this prized part of the animal, and it's so delicious. It's so good. It's also super expensive. There's things that you can do to these other cuts that make it taste just as good as a ribeye.
Exactly.
Like you can buy a regenerative chuck roast for $10 to $12 a pound. You can do these very simple things to it that make it taste just like a ribeye. If you literally dry brine that sucker, so get your chuck from your regenerative chuck, throw some salt on it, put it on a plate, let it sit out in your fridge. The salt's going to like really tenderize the meat, and then you can reverse sear it. So you basically just put it in your oven, you cook it like kind of low and slow for like 20, 30 minutes. And then you sear that on a cast iron to finish, or carbon steel, whatever you like to cook with. It literally, you basically have a ribeye for like 10 bucks.
So good. Chuck steak. I just made one the other night. It's such a great way to have a really good quality meat that tastes like you said, almost exactly like ribeye. That's so great. You're making all the listeners hungry, man.
I know, dude. But also like this is a tough point to tread on because people are going to push back on me, but I'm like, I've always lived my life just being like, I'm okay investing a significant part of my income to my food because it's going to taste delicious, but it's going to give me the function that I ultimately desire. And something you probably heard us say on the show is like, we really try to not focus so much on the upfront price of the food. It's obviously easy for me to say this being a single guy, but it's like, I'm not making a ton of money, but I focus on the holistic asset that food actually is. So for me, I'm like, I know that if I'm eating some really good quality meat, maybe having some berries, some cheese, cooking my stuff in ghee, really good quality, like olive oil, dressing, stuff like that, I'm going to feel so good that it's actually going to make me more money in the long term because I'm going to operate on such a higher level.
Yeah.
Like if I can have more energy to write a couple more Twitter threads a month, record a couple more podcasts, have more money to invest into, more energy to invest in a Noble, that can make me millions of dollars over the long term. And we can make it even more priceless. If you're a parent that's listening to this and that diet fuels you with more energy to play with your kids, play catch with your son, that's a priceless investment. So we're talking about millions of dollars, if not a priceless investment in your own health that comes from spending more money on the food that you're putting into your body.
I could not agree more. I absolutely love that. When people tell me that this way of eating is cost prohibitive, first of all, I say, well, no, it's not. It absolutely is not. And second of all, let's check out your car. Let's check out the house you decided to live in and let's see what toys you buy. Like, what are you prioritizing?
Yeah, it's a matter of choice. It's a matter of perspective. It's a matter of just like priority, where you actually choose to spend your dollars. And if you actually did a monthly budget of what you're spending your money on, there are for sure ways that you can cut corners on what you're spending and reinvest that into the food you put in your body.
Yeah, absolutely. It occurs to me also that like when I picked up my quarter cow, it is a 30-minute walk from my house. It's his mom that lives here in my neighborhood, and I'm able to walk over there every time they get a delivery of eggs. I go over there and buy a bunch of eggs and just walk them back home. But I'm not actually visiting the ranch itself. I've never been there. It's in the middle of nowhere in Nevada. You've been able to experience lots of different ranches. What have been some of your observations of like actually going to some of these places?
Yeah. So I've been fortunate, right? I've been to White Oak Pastures in Bluffton, Georgia twice, which in a lot of ways is like the gold standard of farming. Polyface Farms in the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia, gold standard of farming. I've been to a regenerative ranch in Crawford, Colorado. I've been to a regenerative ranch in San Diego. I've been to a bunch of ranches in Texas, in the greater Texas region. And I just hearing these farmer stories, everyone comes from a different background, whether it's like a Will Harris, who is a fifth generation farmer. 3 generations before him, they did things conventional. He started learning about regenerative practices, how to actually restore the land. And he made this business decision in the early 90s that he was going to swear off these industrial fertilizers and conventional practices that have basically fed his family for generations to doing this risky regenerative model. And the business has flourished because of it. And it's just so inspiring to hear these stories. And you also hear these stories like in Texas, we went to this raw dairy farm called the Jersey Barnyard. It's a 5th generation dairy farm, and their margins are razor low. And it's so interesting because you meet a lot of these ranchers, and if they just sold their farm, they could be getting millions of dollars. So they're asset rich, but a lot of them are super cash poor because the margins are so low, and so many people don't think about food as a holistic asset. I think we're starting to see the right side of that trend where people really are starting to dig into this stuff and want to build those personal connections. And I'm hopeful that those ranchers are going to be in a much better financial situation in the next 5 to 10 years. But you realize that like it's so important for them to provide their community with the most nutrient dense foods and really maintain their family legacy, that they're literally been living on razor thin margins for decades after decades. And me personally, like, I don't know if I would have had the stomach to do something like that, but they're so committed. They're so passionate about what they do. They like a lot of these ranches, they love connecting with customers. They love to do farm tours. They'd love to have you out there to walk you through the ranch, to walk you through their practices. And I would encourage anyone to go on that website, eatwild.com, and just find a ranch and just take a little tour and meet the rancher and just learn more about the environment and how your food is being raised. And like, once you actually see that, there's really no going back, and it really will it will almost push you to always support your rancher because you understand how much effort and intensity is required to give you that really good nutrient dense product. And like, a lot of times with this processed food, everything is optimized for convenience, for the conservation of effort, or ranching is the opposite of that. It's like the investment in energy is actually what makes that beautiful product at the end of the day.
That's amazing. So cool that you are able to visit there. How are these ranchers dealing with the extreme amount of methane that's coming out of these cows? Are they treating their cows in any special way to not blow up the earth?
Well, you go out there, like you said, and you see these Texas is a different story because there's so many droughts, but you know, a lot of these ranchers, you see there's like this beautiful green grass, you see these happy cattle, you see all these animals out there, like that orchestra, that biomimicry that we were talking about, all these different animals interacting with the land in their own unique way. You see happy ranchers, you see people that are working on the farm. Like White Oak Pastures is in Bluffton, Georgia. It's this very rural town in South Georgia. There's 150 people in that town. Will Harris employs 120 people on his ranch, and he's
Wow.
effectively feeding the entire community. So something that he talks a lot about is like the cliche question is like, is regenerative agriculture scalable? Which is the wrong question to ask, because you're essentially being like, can we compare regenerative agriculture to the conventional industrial meat industry, which is like just not the comparison. And it's more about getting back to these local systems where back in the day, there were a few ranches per county, there were a few processing plants per county, and people in the local community would go to those ranches, they would flock to those ranches, and the ranches would be able to fuel the local community. So it's really like localization at a larger level is going to give us that quote unquote scalability that everyone likes to ask about.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, we got to talk about Noble. What problem were you two trying to solve when you created this product, and what is it?
Yeah, so Noble is the first product that Harry, myself, and our third partner, Colin Stuckert, launched. And we actually launched it in April of this year. So it's a very new product. It's been around for about 3 months. And we started thinking about, okay, the podcast, the Twitter, the newsletter, those are like, that's our form of medium to have the change that we want. But what's something physical that we could put into the space that's kind of like a reflection of our ethos around nutrition? And I was thinking to myself, what are the foods that I've really gravitated towards that have given me the ideal health? Obviously, beef, organ meats, right? Tribes have thrived on these foods for thousands and thousands of years. We no longer eat the organ meat. We only prize the muscle meat. So beef, grass-fed organs, colostrum, which is the first milk of the mother cow. It's super nutrient dense. There's all these digestive enzymes to really help that baby cow thrive, very similar to human breast milk that mothers give to their children. There's all these digestive enzymes that the baby needs to give it that happy and healthy gut. And grown adults can be drinking that first milk if there's extra and actually get a lot of those same benefits. And then also like these collagenous parts of the animal, right? These tendons, these joints, these things that give you your beautiful glowing skin, your hair, your skin, healthy gut. A lot of it's found in bone broth. And we were like, is there a way to maybe do that? Can you turn these foods into a powder that maybe would replace like conventional protein powders that are either plant-based, they're using really cheap quality whey and casein protein, where they're dehydrating this milk, they're adding additives to it that are really going to disrupt your gut? Is there a way that we could take these nutrient dense foods and turn it into a powder? And that was really the genesis behind Noble Origins. So what Noble is it's the most nutrient dense powder that you can possibly put into your body. So what we're doing is we've taken all these cows from grass-fed farms in New Zealand, and where the protein is coming from beef, from the muscle meat of the animal, the collagenous parts of the animal. We're throwing organs in there: heart, liver, spleen, pancreas, bone, blood, and colostrum. And we've turned it into a single scoop that you can take every single day. So it's all these nutrient dense foods that might not taste good, but through the freeze drying process, you really dull a lot of that taste. And we do add some stevia to it. We do add a little bit of cocoa powder. We do add some vanilla bean to it, but it's a shake, right? It's like you can drink it with water. I love it with raw milk. You can throw it into coffee, kind of that animal, almost like the animal-based version of Athletic Greens. That's something you have to give credit to Athletic Greens, where it's like, regardless of how you feel about the nutrition, the ingredients that's in there, they've made it a part of everyone's habit. So for us, it's like, well, if you can make these foods drink good, taste good, and drink really well, it's like the perfect bridge product, right? Where like guys like us, we'll eat raw liver, but there are some times where it's like, dude, I get out of the gym, I need those nutrient dense foods quickly right now. I'm traveling, I'm on the go. But also like, what about my sister? What about my mom? I want them to be healthy. They're probably not going to eat organ meats, but they'll drink a powder that tastes really good, that's giving them a lot of those same properties. And it's an amazing bridge product to get them to listen to the Boundless Body Radio, to get them to listen to the Meat Mafia, to start buying regenerative meat. So for us, it's like, this is really our baby, where it's like, we're going to take a powder with all these nutrient dense foods, but we want it to be the bridge product into this world that is the Meat Mafia, regenerative agriculture, and like just the right path that everyone should be on.
That's amazing. We pay a $20 commission anytime somebody mentions our podcast on our podcast. So I'll send you a check for that. Thank you.
Please do. Happy to pay it.
So I was able to meet you at KetoCon, and I was telling you at the time, or before we started recording, that like I only got to meet you on Sunday afternoon when everything was kind of winding down because your booth was crazy busy all weekend. In fact, it was so not busy at the time that I was finally able to meet you that I think Sean Baker wandered over. We got to chat with him, and he didn't have his like normal entourage with like 30 people following him, wanting his picture and everything. And my observation of KetoCon was very much it was very much carnivore driven. The keto products, the greens, the biohacking kind of stuff. I know the conference is shifting in that direction next year anyway. I didn't notice that those places were very busy in the vendor area, whereas anything carnivore, the carnivore speakers, the carnivore, chats that were actually done, the panels, like that was driving the conference, in my opinion. That's just what I observed. And so I was able to witness how many people were interested in your product. How has it been received so far?
Yeah, man. First of all, KetoCon has a very special place in my heart. I've gone to two of them, and they're really launch pads for the Meat Mafia brand and Noble in general. And what I mean by that is we went last August, the first time, and we were really just bystanders. And we were thinking to ourselves, there's going to be a lot of great people to connect with, a lot of podcast guests. And we want to just get people's sense of like this keto movement, this carnivore movement. How are people actually thinking about implementing these practices in their day-to-day lives? And it was such an amazing, valuable experience. I think we ended up getting 20 podcast guests from it. So that was like a launching pad for our show. And I think why people were responding to our Noble booth outside of it being a brand new product is like, people are waking up and understanding that like, we've really been sold the false narrative, which has been a lot of if you were to summarize the show, it's like, we've really been sold the false narrative for a long time. We can no longer demonize animal products, and we need more convenient ways to be able to get these things into our diet. And I think people were really seeing that with our booth, which is why we were getting great traction at KetoCon. So it was an amazing proof of concept for us. But, having Sean interested in something like that, having some of these other speakers interested in that, and having the participants interested in Noble and what we're doing was amazing. And it's like, we've done about 50K in sales in the first 3 months, which is great indication that like the market is really ripe for something like this. It's funny because I have like 50 bags of product at our apartment in Austin, and I just handed it out all over the place because, obviously we want to build a super successful, financially viable product. But even more than that, it's like, I just want to give people the most nutrient dense foods and have them taste it, have their eyes light up, have them feel how they should be feeling when they put the right foods into their body. And that's really why we're doing this. We want to just have this thing everywhere. We want to make it super convenient to order, where it's like, you can go to nobleorigins.com and get yourself a couple bags of it, have it show up at your doorstep every single month, and like give it to your friends, give it to your family, give it to your coworkers, use it for yourself, and like start to spread the message. And one of the things that you'll notice is we were pretty intentional about the branding. There are a lot of brands in the carnivore animal-based space that kind of have this like rustic primal feel to it, which is great. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it kind of pigeonholes your customer base, where it's like, you can still build a big brand doing that. But if we want to use Noble to be the catalyst to maybe fix the food system, we specifically went with like more modern, clean, neutral branding, where it's like a man could order this, a woman could order this, a guy that just wants to get more protein into their diet could order this. They're not going to be off put by like the really modern, the really like primal rustic branding. And for us, it's all about like being as genuine as possible, and how do we cast as wide of a net as possible and pull them into our world.
I love that. What is your plan for the future as far as that goes? Are you going to expand into different products, or are you going to kind of just focus on the one product? I see lots of supplement companies that end up getting, so in the thick of all kinds of different products. It's almost like Cheesecake Factory. You can have Mexican, you can have sushi, you can have Italian, and none of it is any good. I think we just lost Cheesecake Factory as a sponsor, potential sponsor for the show. But what is your plan? What are you going to do with the brand line?
I think it's so easy in the early stages of product to kind of have the shiny object syndrome. And I find myself falling into it all the time, where I sometimes think like, damn, like a refrigerated, ready to drink option of Noble mixed with grass-fed milk at a grocery store would crush. Or like, our brain is always spinning with new product ideas, but we also really like the concept of keeping it very simple. Like when you go to the website right now, there's 3 products. There's the chocolate protein, there's the vanilla protein, and then there's like a bag of just straight organ powder. So it's like, that's more of like a boost where you could put it in your smoothie, you could put it in your bulletproof latte, you could sprinkle it into ground beef and make like primal meatballs, you could put it on your steak. But we like the simplicity of those things, and we want people to know us as the people that are creating like the most nutrient dense powders that are currently on the market right now. So, we could potentially expand to new things in the future, but I think we want to really own what we're good at and have people know Noble for like that one thing.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, dude, I didn't want to miss this point. And so the last thing I really want to ask you about, and I'll set this up by saying we were visiting some family. Some family was in town actually visiting us. And I want to say it was like the Saturday before Memorial Day, which is my wife and I, kind of take Saturdays off. We were working the other 6 days. And the family member had asked us, like, what are you guys going to do on your days off for the rest of the weekend? We're doing Sunday, Monday. And it was weird because it hadn't even occurred to me. Like, we've got clients, we've got our business, like we're working Sunday and Monday and seeing people. And we worked for a long time in a corporate office doing what we love to do, which is personal training, nutrition coaching, but with a big box gym. That all ended during COVID and we had to start our own business. And I was reflecting on the drive home with my wife. I was like, what would it be like? I wonder what an alternate life would have been like, where we're working a corporate job, we're getting a salary, we're making good money, going on vacations, getting PTO. I don't have my 401k match anymore. All that stuff we kind of lost when we lost our job at the corporate office, at the corporate gym. What would it be like to kind of work and then maybe have like your weekends or free times or vacation to kind of follow your passion? You have been on both ends of that spectrum. You've had the corporate job and chased after that. You've also left that corporate job to start your own thing and really follow your passion. I don't know if there's a right or a wrong, but can you comment on what your experience has been like?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me was like, I had the good salary at a young age. I had great benefits. I lived a great life in New York. I enjoyed a lot of what I did. And then there was also a lot of what I didn't like what I did too. But for me, the biggest thing that I kept coming back to was this voice in the back of my mind that kept it kept like lightly pushing me towards this path of creation. And when you lean into the path of creation, it's everything that you just talked about. It's long days. It's a 7-day-a-week thing. There's not weekends. There's not benefits. There's not these 401k matches. There's not this big salary that's consistent. It's predictable. It's the safety blanket. But on the other side of that is the incredible reward of doing something that you truly love and the ability to actually make money off of your passion. And as you mentioned earlier in the show, Casey, it's like, now is the time to do it. There's websites like Shopify that literally allow you to spin up a product where you can be making money off it at the same day. A podcast, nothing is preventing you from downloading Zoom for free, hitting record, posting it on Transistor, a number of free services that exist, and now you have your own thing. So it's like the barriers to entry to create something and monetize something online have never been lower, but you have to understand where you're at in your journey. And for me, it took about 6 months of pursuing Meat Mafia on the side of working a corporate job, saving up, realizing that I was ready to make that push. Other people like Harry had the risk tolerance where they were willing to go cold turkey, pull the pin, start doing Meat Mafia without making money on day one. I think you need to do some really hard reflection on what's your pain tolerance, what's your risk adversity, what's the amount of money that you've saved up, where are you willing to invest in this thing, how many months are you willing to do this without making money before you throw in the towel? Those are all questions that you need to answer. And look, dude, I have fucking difficult days every single day. I have days where I'll have the best podcast I've ever recorded. We'll make great money with Noble. And then I'll think about the 15 other things that I could have done or the uncertainty that comes from it. But my mission of wanting to really help fix the food system and do something that I'm truly passionate about, that's a goal and a mission that's so strong that that's my anchor that pulls me towards everything that I want to do, that almost pulls me out of the uncertainty and that thing. So I think you have to understand the way that you're wired and find something that really acts as that anchor that will push you through all the uncertainty, because it's super difficult. And I don't think we've made it out onto the other side of that, where we've had like a Mark Sisson type Primal Kitchen exit where he's made $300 million and he's on the beach in Miami. But I do know that he really enjoyed that process. It took him a really long time and he wouldn't regret any of it. So getting to speak to people like that and being in the midst of the process ourselves, not even have fully monetizing this thing, it's still worth it, even in the midst of all the uncertainty. So if there's someone that's listening to the show that really has that itch, like, I would encourage you to lean in and put your head down and see where you are in 6 months. And I would guarantee you your life is going to be changed.
I love that. What an amazing answer. And let me join the other thousands of people to tell you that your episode with Mark Sisson was all time, dude. That was so good. You guys had a wonderful conversation. I just so much appreciate that answer and appreciate your time coming on our show today, Brett. Where do you want people to go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Yeah. So I would say Twitter is probably the easiest way to connect with me personally. My handle is Meat Mafia Brett, and my partner Harry is Meat Mafia Harry. So really simple. Our show is called the Meat Mafia Podcast. So YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, pretty much any streaming platform you can find the show. And then if you are interested in ordering some Noble and connecting with us further, nobleorigins.com, really simple landing page. And, chocolate protein, vanilla protein, and then unflavored organs as well. And we are coming out with an unflavored version of the protein powder. If you are a purist and, you don't really want that sweetness or that stevia in there, we're working on that too. But I would say that those three things are the best.
Awesome. We will link all of that in the show notes. Brett, like I said, thank you so very much for all of your content. I was so grateful to be able to meet you in person and tell you thank you for all the work that you and Harry have done. I've really appreciated all the content you've been putting out in the last year and a half. And thank you so very much again for taking time out of your very busy day and your very busy life to come on our show today. We really appreciate you.
Casey, thanks so much for having me, man.
Absolutely. It was an honor. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.